So today on Sports File, we're taking a quick look at the lost season of the Montreal Canadiens, the 1973-74 campaign. Now, this was a year was well known for the fact that All-Star goalie and Stanley Cup and Summit Series champion Ken Dryden, he shocked the hockey world as he sat out the entire 1973-74 season to pursue 1 year of legal studies for his off-ice profession of being a lawyer. Now, Dryden was going to enter that season coming off a Vezina Trophy and, of course, the Summit Series. He basically, there was rumors that he was offered a contract, he didn't like it, and he decided to bowl training camp while Sam Pollock fumed over the decision. Now, the main goalie that replaced Dryden that year was the inefficient and somewhat mediocre Wayne Thomas. Now, Wayne Thomas had a long career, as did backups Michel Larocque and Michel Place, and the threesome was considered the worst Montreal Canadiens goalie, starting goalies in team history. Now, the Thomas appeared in 42 games and almost did Montreal in. He was so inefficient that when the playoffs occurred, Michel Larocque started, but that's another story altogether. Now, Montreal finished the season second place in the East Division with a somewhat paltry record of 45 wins, 24 losses, and 9 ties. And it was a bad offensive year for the team because they only scored 283 goals while giving up 240. And for Montreal to give up 3 goals a game in the modern era was kind of weird. Now, that season, Frank Mahovlich led the team both on and off the ice with 80 points, including 49 assists, with Conway getting a very respectable 40 goals. Now, the Canadiens did qualify for the playoffs by finishing second place, setting up a matchup with New York Rangers, who had defeated Montreal in several playoffs before. And in this series, Montreal was very ineffective. He lost 2 games to the Forum, and Michel Larocque started all 6. And I remember watching that series. They really had no motivation to beat the Rangers. It seems you're either looking for Dryden to come back in the playoffs or looking for somebody to lead the way. But that year had a good lineup. They had Pete Mahovlich, Jacques Lemaire, Guy Lafleur, Henri Richard, the mediocre Chuck Lefley, Guy Lapointe, Schutt, Murray Wilson, Larry Robinson, the old standbys, Serge Savard, of course, Yvon Lambert's kind of first full season, Bureau Bouchard, and a lot of young players too. Bob Gainey was starting off, but it just seemed that it was not what they wanted to be. Now, between Thomas, Larocque, and Place, they all 3 had a winning record, but again, Michel Place was the problem. He played in 15 games, had a goals against average of 4.08, which is extremely terrible. But in the playoffs, Steve Shutt had a good performance. He had 5 goals in 6 games, and so did Conway, but they're just weren't motivated enough to do it. Now, when I called this the last year, the Montreal Canadiens, it basically was a link to the last great kind of 1970s era, to the rebuild of last great 1960s era to the rebuild of the mid-70s. And they had a great draft that year because drafting Gainey number 1 out of the Peterborough Peach, went a long way to reestablishing Montreal's defensive side, like Gilles Tremblay had. Now, I had the opportunity to talk to people through the years, Montreal fans, specifically about why that season was a nothing year for the squad. And I really believe with Dryden not playing, it took the momentum. Basically, how Montreal worked back then, they would put pressure on Dryden in the first period, and Montreal would get started the Flying Frenchman. Dryden would hold him in, and then they would score a lot of goals in the second and third period. But what a lot of people don't remember, that series against the Rangers was tied 2-2. But the last 2 games, Montreal had every opportunity to come back. And but the other significance that year is Bill Masterson Trophy went to Henri Richard. But what's nice about the year, if you go back to the old card sets, you're seeing some of the photos in my podcast right now. Some lot of nice shots of Robinson, Cornway, the All-Star cards and stuff. And Montreal's jerseys that year were probably one of the most distinct because it had the number above the jersey, and it was kind of a refit of the old traditional. So there were some good things about the year. The photography of Denis Brodeur, Martin Brodeur's father, still remain great. Some of the greatest Molson and Montreal Canadiens calendars were from that year. And the publicity for the team, again, was still excellent. Red Fisher covering them in the different Quebec media. So again, they had no chance of winning the Cup that year. I think they were lucky to keep Larocque, but having Thomas and Place in there, no confidence at all. Sort of like with Denis Herron, came in from Montreal, later Richard Sevigny, stopgap. But like I said, you better, as Claude Rell would say, it's better to put the board in the net because the goaltending that year was tremendously mediocre. Now, here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. If you go on YouTube, you're not going to find much NHL highlights of Montreal that year. For some reason, a lot of it is not broadcast. But 74 was known again for the rise of the Philadelphia Flyers, beating Bobby Orr in the finals. But in the regular season, there was rumblings of Montreal and Philadelphia building on a rivalry because of the years previous. He had played in 72-73 playoffs. Bertie Perron had stood on his head, and he obviously didn't beat Montreal, but he gave him a good shot. And a lot of people basically believed that Philadelphia in 73-74 were worried that Montreal was going to rebuild. But then again, this was a year away. So on this beautiful pre-storm day in Meductic, New Brunswick, we're recording live from our good friends here at Cummings Brothers in Meductic. Please patron this location. Great people here, a great garage, great atmosphere. And as we like to say back in the day in Montreal, we're not there yet, but we're going to be back again. Have a great one. Bye.